All right, so the next chapter we have here is chapter 12, which is Escape Your Echo Chamber. And today I'm joined by my best friend Okakura, and we're going to go ahead and we'll tackle this chapter together. And yeah, we'll see what happens. All right, well, here we go. Okay. Okay, so after this first section, Julia is saying that it actually doesn't work if you try to listen to the other side of the story in order to, understand or change your mind. She says it doesn't work. Any theories or ideas of already before we even read this, why it doesn't work, and we can see how much your prediction matches up.
It's mostly because it's hard for people to listen to the other side, mostly because it's already hard to listen to the other side. If what they have in their mind is what they think the opposition is, then they've already formed a wall to like pretty much knock down any of the other side's opinions and stuff. So basically, you've already lost the war before you even started, or I guess in this case, you've already. They're not going to listen to whatever the other side has to say because they subconsciously think that it's wrong,
Hmm.
and there's no point in me like respecting it or listening to it because it just doesn't reflect my values or their values.
So basically,
It's
you're saying that people are already established with their way of thinking, so it doesn't matter if you hear from the other side, they're never gonna budge no matter what, kind of thing.
for in a general sense, yes, and yeah, there's not really much to say. There's not really much more to say about it because yeah, you're kind of rooted into your views,
Hmm.
and that's why trying to talk politics and religion is probably like one of the worst feelings when you try to convince people about certain things in that field. Like it's a lot easier if it was something more universal, I guess, like science, math, like those are established things, and yeah, you'll have different points of view on certain things, um, like evolution or, you know, and that's fine because there's always multiple angles that you can think of.
Hmm.
But when it comes to politics and religions, like that is very subjective, and it's very hard to try and talk people into actually trying to see your point of views. Like just think of like any political person or friend that you have, and you try to speak to them about like the other side, or you try to speak to them about certain issues that their party is like focused on or not focused on. Like pretty much, I guess in current events, like Biden's 4.1 trillion infrastructure plan,
Hmm.
like Democrats are definitely very gung ho about spending all that money, while on the other side, the Republicans are like, "Yo, we are spending way too much money. Like, how are we going to pay for it? We're going too heavy into the debt." And I mean, I can see both views. Like, I would like to assume that I can see both views of the parties, but I'm usually more of a or I try to be as neutral as possible.
Hmm.
But um, I mean, you'll see it all the time in like news outlets, media outlets. Freaking, Democrat says this, Republican says that, and it doesn't really, you know, tackle the main issue. It's just
Mm.
there for like clickbaits. It's clickbaits, like view counts, like clicks, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't address like, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, even though we have a lot of vaccinations going around. But and and there are also like conflicting reports about like the American economy is booming, but you know there are prices rising like everywhere. Um, Apparently, like uh, the price of chicken grew 50% or something. Um,
Oh.
like I was watching a daily news channel, and he was mentioning that basic necessities, specifically like uh, well, not basic necessities, but construction supplies, like they've gotten incredibly expensive. Like pieces of lumber or whatever that used to go for hundreds is now going for thousands. Same thing for real estate, like homes that were, kind of ranging around the 200, 300K range, would be, hanging out in the market for about a month or so. Now it only stays for like half a month, and it's risen up to like 300, 400K. So there's definitely some weird things going on at the moment. I'm not exactly sure uh, if you could convince someone on the other side, on either side, like, hey, why can't it's usually why they try to quote unquote compromise, but it's really hard to actually like come up with something that will satisfy both parties. And I guess in current or recently, like the Democrats and Republicans are kind of arguing about like the stimulus checks, and then for some reason all of a sudden they've suddenly passed it. Like before, when I think Trump was in office, they were just like, no, we are not having a stimulus, or at least the Republicans, the main party in power at the time, were just like, hey, we don't want a stimulus check. Like we can't afford it. Yada yada yada. And then when Biden came to power, and then the seats of power started to change. It's more Democrat heavy now, and then they passed the stimulus check, and the Republicans kind of couldn't do anything about it since they had a process called reconciliation. Um, though I'm probably getting all this stuff wrong in terms of like accuracy and timelines. I'm just sort of spouting what I remember from here and there. But anyways, like yeah, the main idea was, can we get two opposing parties to actually like listen to the other side, get them to, kind of see that there may be some other ways to address certain issues, but it's kind of just left up in the air. I don't want to be too negative about this, but it's very, very difficult to actually get positions of power to actually kind of bend to the opposing party. Much even better, like a weaker quote unquote party that, or the the lesser party. I'm not exactly sure how to put it, but to actually like say like, hey, you know, I know it's like going up to a bully and that's been bullying you all this time, and you're just like, can you please stop bullying me? That like, do you think the bully is just going to just stop like taking your lunch money just because you asked him? Maybe if you had some leverage, like if you had like a teacher behind you, or maybe if you kind of um came to an agreement, but just asking him to stop bullying you is kind of a red flag to just get thrown in a trash can and then get your lunch money stolen anyways.
Right. And it's interesting because obviously in the beginning she's saying like, "Hey, listening to the other side isn't going to work. That's not going to work." And you've come up with a lot of ideas that kind of point to that. Like one, they're too stubborn, two, you know, especially if they're in, they have a power, they have like authority, like if you're president or something, it's harder to get somebody who's in power to kind of listen when they're already in power. And then three, another thing that you mentioned that was really interesting is that, like just suddenly asking somebody to flip to the other side is like asking the bully that's been bullying you all this time to stop taking your lunch money. It's nonsensical, and that's why listening to the other side, probably doesn't work. I am guessing that she is going to propose a solution that is different than listening to the other side. But in that case, if you're not listening to the other side, that means that you're listening to the side that you're already in. That's what it seems like this chapter is going to go. Having that in mind, um, have any thoughts or predictions of like what she might uh, present as a alternative solution so that maybe people can switch to the other side? Do you think she's able to do that?
Mm, I think the more, I guess, logical way to do this is just to find people that are open minded.
Hmm.
Like that would be the most obvious solution. Like find people that are willing to actually, put down their views, their stubborn ways, like their biases and stuff. Preferably someone that isn't too into politics or religion.
Hmm.
Like those group of people are definitely a tough nut to crack. But if you can find people that are more, I don't want to say logical, but just mm, I don't want to say complicated or sophisticated because there are definitely some intelligent people that are biased, but it sort of holds them back not being a little bit more open to stuff. Like it just really depends on the person. But
Got
yeah,
it.
I would honestly say the easiest way would just be to find people that are more open. Like
Got it.
I can't really say it any other way. I've been trying to think of something, but just being open is already a good quality in terms of just it kind of reflects the whole theme of the book, the scout mindset. Like those people are usually very curious. They are very open to trying to find out like why things are the way they are, and they don't usually let their personal prejudices like hold them back. Like uh hmm, yeah, just common issues that seem a bit kind of controversial, I guess. Like I guess abortion is a good one. Like you'll find some pro life, pro choice, but I mean everyone has their own views on certain things, and if you can find those that know about that can state the other side clearly, then I think they should be a lot easier to like negotiate with, to compromise with, because you know that they know that they kind of they see the whole picture. Like
Hmm.
they won't confuse themselves or muddle themselves with their current party, their current views or whatever, but they're always looking to grow. They're always looking to
Gotcha.
learn more, and it's a riveting experience.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I think that you may be onto something. So, okay, those are the predictions of like how this chapter is going to kind of play out. Let's see if it does, and if that's what the answer is, or if there's something new that we can glean from this. So, um, gosh, yeah, let's keep going. All right. Okay, so for this section, uh, it's actually talking about the fact that when people listen to the other side, when it comes to people they respect, then it kind of influences, whoever is listening to go the other way because there is kind of respect involved. There's, you know, there's more credibility. That's basically the idea of this. Uh, Question, Okakura, have you ever felt like this was the case for you? Do you ever feel like there was a point where you disagreed with something until you heard somebody who you respect kind of bring out an argument where, they had clear facts and it made you reconsider your previous point of view?
Mm, there probably have been instances where that's happened, but I guess the thing about me is I usually try to avoid those.
Hmm.
Like anything that is kind of that can be argued about,
Mm-hmm.
I usually try to avoid, and I usually avoid those people mostly because it's definitely not worth it for me personally, like mentally, to get like emotionally involved with it, and I know I would get emotionally involved with it just because that's just how I am as when it comes to certain topics. I guess
Got it.
it's kind of hard to keep a cool head and actually kind of and like just kind of talk with reason.
Hmm.
And it can definitely get even harder when the other side is kind of unreasonable. So
Right. So, are you saying that you avoid hearing the other side in general, and that you, even if it's somebody you respect, you do not want to have anything to deal with it, kind of thing?
it is that, but usually I know if I respect them enough
Mm.
that they are definitely open to that.
Oh, okay.
Like they kind of know where I'm coming from. I know where they're coming from. I always try to see things from both sides first.
Mm.
So it like I usually don't find myself in those situations where I have to argue. Like it call it weird, but I guess it's kind of an advantage for me because I usually don't get into those like types of confrontation arguments
Mm.
about opinion stuff. Like I guess for a good example is just have we ever argued about something?
Um, that yeah, no, that's a great example because I'm sure we've had disagreements about things, but uh, we've never gotten to like an emotional discourse. I think. Um, nope. I cannot think of anything. Um, so in that case, it's really like, okay, it's funny. So it's almost like the prerequisite in the first place is you respect somebody because they're open minded, right? And that's kind of like why you respect them. So when they do talk to you and they disagree, you know that it's okay because if you say something and it makes sense, they'll actually acknowledge it. I think that's what I'm getting at. Is that um, it's like the chicken or the egg question. Like, do you get and in your case, I feel like you, the people you respect, are typically people who are open minded that you can discuss these things with in the first place.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. It's just a lot easier to not push certain people's buttons. Like I mean, there's actually a very deep, dark side of me that loves pushing people's buttons. Like I like it's like it's essentially trolling them. Like I actually do like trolling certain people just to kind of trigger them, just to see how they react to certain things. Like I actually enjoy doing that. Um,
Interesting. Would you admit that to me as like about me as well?
um, you're not someone that would actually be triggered by a lot of things, so no, I wouldn't be playful, quote
Mm.
unquote playful with you to try and trigger you. Like it's kind of hard to get you angry or like emotionally invested into something. So so I don't really need to do that kind of tactic with you, I guess. But it's very easy to trigger people online.
Oh.
Obviously, like Twitter is like one of the best places to do that. That's why they're so popular. Like you can essentially tweet anything and you'll trigger someone.
Um,
Like it's kind of a sad truth, but Twitter was definitely not made for uh, philosophical, sophisticated conversations and intelligent commerce, as you put it. Like it's very hard to actually have a decent conversation with someone that isn't going to like derail or something.
wow. Gosh, that's interesting. And everybody thinks that Twitter is, like it represents the whole world. But I guess the weird truth about it is that it doesn't, because there are people like you and me that stay out of it. And we stay very far from that whole, very, how should I say, easily triggered mob kind of mentality.
Yeah, like Twitter would probably definitely represent the loudest people, like people who pretty much like the internet warriors.
Uh,
That like they can do whatever they want on Twitter. Like if they want to use their time to do that, like go ahead, be my guest. I don't care. Like that's definitely not my cup of tea. But I mean, it'll definitely affect their views a lot, especially if they're camping Twitter, because Twitter will definitely try to post a lot of controversial stuff that will
well,
like
yeah.
it's okay to generate discussion like that's okay, that's fine, but the way that they're doing it is kind of sketchy to me.
Yeah, you know what? Once I think about it, when you think of Twitter, it's still a business model, and this is the age of attention, where the more attention you can keep from other people, the more money you make. And
Right.
that's really true. And Twitter has this way of analyzing you or whoever, is logged in. Twitter knows what presses your buttons, and they'll feed it to you so that you can keep looking at it. And um, it gives you the illusion that the whole world is doing the same thing. And maybe a majority, or maybe a lot of people are doing it. But I think what's funny is that it's still feeding you an illusion. So all the things that are popular in Twitter, you think, oh my gosh, everybody thinks this way. But maybe that's not true. It's only geared to the people who fall into its trap, I guess.
Yeah, I mean they have a trending section on the side, and usually that's definitely a good way to get people's attention. It's just like, well, what's trending today? Like there there was a good example is like there was actually it was a couple of weeks ago. Some people were actually trying to do like boycott Genshin because oh my god, like they're making fun of indigenous people
Oh.
because there's a race of uh, monsters, I guess, called hilichurls,
Hmm.
and they're essentially our enemy. What I'm talking about right now is a video game called Genshin Impact. It's a free to play adventure game, uh, uh, but as you go through it, you'll run into some aggressive monsters, and one of the more prominent ones is the hilichurl. And
Huh.
some people on Twitter pointed out that freaking the hilichurls look like indigenous people, and they're just like, okay, so this is not
Oh.
cool, and they were like trying to kind of downplay Genshin,
Oh
which
wow.
they made a hashtag called boycott Genshin, which was really stupid.
Hmm.
I don't even know why they did it in the first place. I guess they just wanted something to do. That's
Gosh.
I don't know. People have a lot of free time, but like when you see Genshin uh rank up in like the top apps or whatever, like it's in the top 10, and there's no way like this little blip of a Twitter rant is going to like bring down its numbers. Like if anything, they just brought more attention to Genshin,
Wow.
just because like people are going to be curious, like, hey, what is this Genshin game? This looks pretty cool. Like I like that. It's very reminiscent of Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda, but it has its own flair. Um, but there, I mean, there's always going to be a group of people that is going to hate what you do or
Ah.
whatever, just because I don't know. Maybe they've had something terrible happen to them and they just want to vent out their stress or something.
Wow.
Maybe they just have too much time on their hands. I don't know. Like that's usually how I see it when people are negative towards something. Something must have happened that that must have gotten their feathers ruffled, and they just want to kind of lash out at something just because, like, oh, maybe something bad like I, what I would say is that they probably got screwed on the gotcha in Genshin. Like they tried rolling for a certain character, they tried rolling for a certain character, they didn't get it, they got something else, and now they're just like, boycott Genshin, I hate this game, like screw this, like it's a horrible game, blah blah blah. But like I think an overwhelming majority would say like the game is very good, and it's really surprising that it's free to play. And there are people out there that have proven that you can clear all content with free to play characters. And there's 7, and you can clear all content. Like it doesn't matter if you got the strongest characters in the game. If you freaking spent a lot of money on it and got like everything, like you can enjoy the game however you like. Like you can yeah, you can spend a lot of money, get all the characters, get all the best weapons, and yeah, like they'll continue releasing content very steadily. We just recently got a new patch 1.5. They released a new domain. They released a new weekly boss, like, and they're going to continue releasing content for the players. And it's really nice that they've given us a roadmap, and they've usually been transparent about like, hey, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, we're gonna make some changes here. Some of the changes were sometimes unnecessary. Some of them were quality of life buffs, which is always welcome. But to the main point, it's just there there will always be an opposition to your cause, to your game, to your whatever, just because like maybe they were raised differently, maybe something happened to them, and it's okay. Like there should always I guess that's what makes life interesting, because there's always going to be like kind of a yin and a yang conflict, stuff like that. And it's okay if people don't see things the way you do. Like honestly, it's okay, as long as you yourself are aware that, hey, this person might not be on the same page as me. But if we hit it off, if we still have fun, they could be a really great friend. Or, that's exactly, why competition is a thing. Like, Microsoft and Apple. It's just like, well, if we didn't have those two, like, where would technology be? Like, they're kind. I don't even know how that even fits in with this, but
Oh gosh. Well,
like,
I that leads me to another like curiosity actually, which is this idea of you're right. Actually, I think that's true. You need competition. You need like the Lakers versus the Celtics. You need those things. And what happens when you dismiss soldier mindset? And let's take this theory of scout mindset. Let's say everybody's like, "Okay, no, I understand you." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, it's cool. I understand you." And if everybody was able to do that, in theory, it sounds great. Like, oh, yeah, like everybody can get along. But what you're kind of poking at is something I didn't even consider up until this point, which is okay, let's have it so that there's scout mindset. What now is going to happen to the world? There's no competition. So we're all going to live peacefully in harmony. We never fight, or maybe if we do fight, it just will be everybody will understand each other. Like, taken into that extreme, do you think life and do you think the world could still, I don't know, be good as it is, or be like better, or do you think people can still make I don't know, stride to like to evolve the human race, or do you think that the opposite is that if people all got peaceful, then this world kind of turns into shit anyway?
well, I hate to point it to you, but we actually need conflict a lot every now and then to actually grow. I don't think what people touch upon very often is that in order to grow, you kind of need opposition.
Huh.
Like, uh,
Wow, this must be one of the most deep topics I've ever gone into in terms of this book, because it's like it's challenging the entire premise of Scout Mindset itself. That really flipped it on its head all of a sudden. Wow.
yeah, I don't know if she'll actually go into this, but it's definitely something I've thought about a lot, and it's really annoying to me that life is kind of been established this way. Like, obviously, I'm open to more or different angles of this, but
Mm-hmm.
the the thing about conflict is that it kind of helps you see things a little bit differently, and it kind of strengthens your fortitude. Maybe, well, not exactly your fortitude, but it strengthens something about you.
Mm.
Like, I guess a good example would be like when you lost your dad.
Yeah.
Well, this is a very I probably shouldn't have said that as lightly as I did,
Oh no
but
no no no. That's totally okay because I'm cool with it, and this is something we've talked about years ago. So yeah, no, we're good. We're good.
no, but it was the first thing that came to mind when I was
Yeah.
talking when I mentioned like conflict. Like, this is a conflict that you would come into often, because it's just like when you lose something, you you're kind of at a loss. You're kind of at a standstill. You don't really know what to do, because it's the first thing. It's just something out of the ordinary. Even though like death is natural,
Um,
like there's no way we can avoid it. Sometimes there are things that are out of our hands. Accidents can happen, like, or unfortunate things can happen, like plane crashes. Maybe your car like just freaking did some random stuff, or you got unlucky and were in a shooting or something. Like, there's not much you can do to kind of avoid it. You kind of just have to make the best of what you have. But I guess I lost my grandma a couple of years ago, but I didn't really feel anything
right.
because
Right.
she lives on the other side of America for me. Well, I
Wow.
wouldn't say
Wow.
the other side, but she lives very far away from me.
Hmm.
So I didn't really get to interact with her often. Maybe like 5 or 6 times. Every time I went up to Cali to to visit her, but it's kind of hard to actually interact with her anyways because she can only speak Vietnamese.
Ah,
Well, I can only speak English,
right,
so
right,
it's very hard for me or it was very hard for me to actually like kind of get close to her.
right, right, right.
So losing her was kind of weird
Hmm.
for me because I didn't really feel anything, and I wasn't really able to overcome anything outside of like, oh, I lost my grandma. Well,
Wow.
I can still continue on with my life, but let's just juxtapose it with your dad. Like,
Hmm.
what exactly did you learn about losing a close family member?
Oh God, this is great. And now you're asking me the questions, which is it's great. I kind of like being put into the hot seat. I feel like, uh, obviously, when he died, I contacted you. You were one of the first people I contacted when he died, um, and I was really, it was really weird for me because he's the breadwinner of the family. He's the one who makes the money. My mom was working. She never worked a day of her life because it was all up to dad, and now he's gone. And now I'm the eldest. I'm the eldest in the family, and I am left with this burden. So now that I was the authoritative one in terms of just being not as the whole for the whole family unit, because my mom was still the leader, but now I was the main male authority figure for my family. It did force me to change. And one of the things that my Taekwondo master told me was don't try to fit your father's shoes. They're really big, and you're still only 21. So don't put that on you. Don't put that on yourself. And even so, I tried anyway. All right, so I am back here with Okakura. It's funny because we're talking about how adversity kind of forces you to get better and stronger. And it's funny because at that point the internet connection basically died and we had to figure out okay, how are we going to continue this? And we did try all the different alternatives that we could, but in the end, I'm gonna have Okakura here on speakerphone, and that's our solution. And I guess that in and of itself is kind of like an example of how adversity helps you get stronger because now we're pushed out of our comfort zone and now we have to resolve to means that we didn't have originally. Would you agree with that, Okakura?
You're definitely bending the situation a bit, but sure.
I mean, it does work to your philosophical advantage that you mentioned earlier. Just a bit, just a bit. Um, but getting back to what happened with my father, it did force me to actually change because, yeah, it wasn't easy. It wasn't, and just that alone, uh, it caused me to be who I am right now. It forced me to look up how to be successful because I didn't have a father figure to ask that from anymore. So I had to look online. I had to dig. I had to find out how to fend for myself. And with that adversity came a lot of good things. So yeah, that's that's what I have to say about that. Okay, so interesting. In this section, there was a study that had feminists and anti feminists kind of come together into this group, and some of them actually changed their mind as long as they were talking in good faith to one another. Um, The only question that I have for you here, Okakura, is do you see this possibly happening with you? Do you ever feel like you have a very like hard opinion about something, but you may be able to consider things if you were in a position like this?
All the time.
Hmm.
And besides, there is a term for it
Huh.
that people don't really realize, or she hasn't really mentioned it.
Huh.
It's a bit extreme, but it's essentially Stockholm syndrome.
Huh.
I don't think it's used in the right context of its actual definition, but essentially it's, or the way I use it is that you're usually opposed to whatever it is that that it is. Like it can be a person, it can be it can be an issue of you, what have you. But eventually you start kind of seeing things a little bit differently, like the more time you spend with it.
Oh, okay. I see.
Though the actual Stockholm syndrome is usually used for like hostage and abuse
Right.
situations.
Right.
But yeah, I take it a bit more. I don't want to say like literally, but I'm pretty sure there's probably still another term that describes it even better. But Stockholm syndrome just comes to mind because pretty much when she was talking about the whole Reddit issue, it's just like, yeah, that is what is that would happen if you start seeing the other side. Like it'll definitely happen more often when um, the person is more open. Like they'll have a defined view, but they're not too entrenched into it. Like they think you see things a different way, or they think things should be one way to some degree. But then after a little bit of enlightenment, um, I, I definitely use the term enlightenment loosely. They start seeing that hey, there is another way, there is another path, and a very good example of this is when your wife was introduced to the fact that hey, the 9 to 5 job is not the way you live life.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. That's true. She was completely against it in the very beginning. Completely. And then she saw me when I had my side business and I was only working part time, only 4 hours a day instead of 8 hours a day. And she started getting very angry. And she was like, "How are you able to do that?" And I said, "Well, she wanted me to get back and work, full time." And then I said, "But I'm handling all my expenses already. I'm paying my half of the bills. Uh, why? Why would I want to?" And it really challenged her. Um, it really did. But then eventually she even beat me, and now once she started to understand like, oh, you don't have to work that much, and if you don't want to, you don't have to, then she actually made a hard right, and now she is only working 3 hours a day. Sorry, 3 hours a week, um, in order to pay the bills and everything because of what she's doing. So that's, yeah, you're right. it's kind of like you kind of yeah, you get exposed to something and then you realize like, wait, okay, maybe that's not so bad, and then you convert, I guess you can say. Um, and what's funny, and I'll keep this short, but I feel like what's funny about it is that I never told her to be an entrepreneur. I never told her to stop working 8 hours a day. I just showed her how my life was, and it convinced her.
Yeah, like when you introduce something that drastically opposes one's natural views, they most likely what will happen is that they'll get curious on how exactly are they doing it, or what exactly about this opposing view is so enticing, or in your case, like why is my husband able to do less work than me but still pay his bills while I'm putting in all these hours, and just feeling really bad and whatnot. So naturally, you would assume that she would, try and break out of the normal 9 to 5, and then go on that path of not necessarily being an entrepreneur, but I would call her a freelancer.
Ah, I see. Yes.
Just because like it in my personal opinion, I think freelancing is probably the future. Just not being bound by anything is very uplifting to a lot of people, and the whole pandemic has actually opened people's eyes in terms of like I can actually spend more time with my family, and I can work remotely and be happy because I don't have to interact with people anymore. I don't have to do all these things and I don't have to do things at work that that can put me in a bad mood. That kind of go against my natural flow of things, and I can actually be more productive. And there are definitely a lot of people, specifically CEOs, that are not particularly fond of this because they want people to come in and actually, do stuff. But since people are starting to discover, like, hey, I can actually do stuff remotely and be happy, and I don't have to, spend money, driving 2 hours to work or something, and burn all this money and whatnot. Like, it's kind of eroding away the quote unquote American way of life, or at least what people think of it to be, like the American dream or whatever. Own a house, have a family, just live that life. Like there's definitely different scripts that fit all sorts of different people, and that general sense of the American dream just doesn't really apply in modern day terms anymore. Just because of technology and like new advances in different fields and stuff, like being able to work remotely is like such a huge boon because you can get the same amount of work done in less amount of time, and you can save a lot of money and time doing so. So why not? Just do that instead of like, I have to drive to work. Have to interact with my coworkers, some of them of which I hate. I hate my manager. Blah blah blah, stuff like that.
Well, it makes me think of something actually, Okakura. Like they say that you are your closest 5 friends, and that's why I keep you close. I keep Kelvin, who was on our last kind of like session, and my other 2 friends. I'll call them my best friend that's an entrepreneur and my best friend that's a writer. I won't put their names out there yet because I haven't asked them. But for all of you guys, you're the top four, and obviously my wife is number one. Um, I think it's funny because would you say that it's true that you are your closest friends? Because the way that I look at it, oh well, my wife, uh, she was with me all this time. She was literally living with me every single day, and my kind of like my desire to actually, you know, get out of the 9 to 5. My desire to find success by uh, not necessarily working longer, but smarter. That in the end, that kind of influenced her because obviously she's the closest to me, so of course it would kind of pass on. Um, would you say that that's kind of like what does end up happening is that it's from all that influence in the end?
Yeah, to some degree. Like if you are like if you if you're in a room with reasonable people, then eventually you'll kind of feel their flow. You'll go with their flow. So it's not too surprising, I guess. Like, uh, the author definitely makes a great point in finding reasonable people, and it'll definitely rub off on you. Just because the more you hang out with them, you'll kind of know their cues, you know their habits, you know their movements, you know the way they think about things, stuff like that. And it's very easy to, I guess, resonate with them just because like everyone, or at least your personal cliques or whatever you want to call it. It's very familiar. It's very difficult to actually have opposing views when everyone, or at least in your own personal circle, like everyone seems to resonate with you in something. Like it doesn't have to be everything, but they'll usually resonate with you in like a particular field, whether it be current events, philosophy, finances. Uh, I don't want to say politics and religions, but I mean, for other people, I would assume it would be the case. Like the author had mentioned, that the people in the experiments, they were usually listening to things that kind of reaffirmed their own views and stuff. The guy listening to the radio all the time, the other two, the couple, like, reading the New York Times and whatnot. And you'll usually tend to gravitate towards those media outlets that actually, resonate with your views, just because it's a lot easier. Like it's the path of least resistance, and that's what we like. We as humans like the least path of resistance.
Huh. Wow. That's interesting. And we tend to follow people, or we tend to be close to people that are aligned with us, at least in one particular field. And I guess that's what it's almost kind of like cross pollination, though, because you may hang out with somebody and they believe in your political stance, but maybe they'll disagree with your religious stance, and then you still have grounds where you can communicate and you can question and you can ask why, and that's one thing that I know I'm kind of notorious for, and thank you for always putting up with some of the questions that I ask, because I definitely ask a lot of questions, but
no, it's fine. I usually like being asked a lot of questions. I personally actually like being in the hot seat. Like one of my personal goals, dreams, is to actually be interviewed, like by an official thing,
yeah,
whatever. Like not like regular job interviews. Those are kind of whatever. Like, I want a kind of a natural, ground to earth like interview where people actually ask me like some really hard hitting questions and actually make me think a little.
Cool. Well, I guess in a way we are actually helping each other out because you know, your thoughts are different than a lot of people that well, no, I don't want to say a lot of people, but you're very blunt when you speak and you say your opinions, and to me that's something I value like highly. Um, and I think that you're not afraid to say what it is you really think about. And some people kind of skirt around, you know, or kind of tiptoe around certain things, but you're okay with that. And to me, that I find that valuable because when I talk to you and I ask you a question, I'm very sure that, you know, I'll get the answer. Even though it might be a harsh answer, it might even be something I don't want to hear, I can trust that you'll still say it. And I think that's what is valuable to me because there aren't a lot of people who can do that. And I think that's maybe one of the reasons why when I started reading this book that I thought about you. I thought about like, oh shoot, I think this is something that we can actually do together, you know, as a project or whatnot. Because that's like in this book, there's it's made pretty clear that people don't like to hear things they don't want to hear. You've kind of made it so that, um, for me at least, like you represent the person that doesn't give a shit if you like if you're gonna say something, whether it be harsh or not. You're just gonna be real with someone, or you know, at least I know maybe you don't do this with everybody, but I know you do it when you're talking to me, um, and yeah, I guess it just depends on the person too.
Yeah, it definitely depends on the person. I definitely act a little differently with another group of friends, but I think it's mostly because we usually don't dive into that sort of thing. Like, we usually just talk about what games we're playing, or what current events are going on. At least in different fields.
Right.
More common stuff. Like, our common thing is usually philosophy and to some degree video games, but it's not. It's usually like very like common stuff. I guess it's not stuff that specific stuff that I'm into or specific stuff that you're into. It's usually something very generic or very popular that people are looking forward to. A good example would just be like Near Replicant.
Oh.
Obviously, it's probably it's the hottest thing or the latest hottest thing that I'm not sure if I would want to get. I probably won't just because I'm cheap. but I mean, eventually I'll probably get it when it's on sale because it's. I mean, I guess it's just because it has weight because it's part of the Nier series. So
right.
It usually explores different facets of humanity, which I was a fan of. Like when I played through Automata, like I was definitely a huge fan of just the story writing in particular.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not really groundbreaking, I guess, but I like the way it's presented. I just really like that. I can that it dives into ideas that people don't really talk about often, and potentially like it could be a really big issue in the future, anyways. So, I mean, all this really just spawned from me like really liking JRPGs, and they usually like Japanese culture, at least in terms of like music and video games. Like they definitely dive into very deep philosophical topics, which America doesn't really do. That's not really representative of us. Like, that's usually why I like Japanese culture, I guess. It's not really something that I've really thought about a lot. But when I think of when I actually read over Japanese lyrics and songs and stuff, there's always a sense of longing, yearning, something. They sort of want to break out of their cage, but they're kind of stuck in it because Japan's like stuck on an island, and they're very xenophobic of strangers and stuff, and it makes sense and why they sing about this sort of stuff.
Wow. And you know what's funny? The people who do get into anime, I'm sure they can relate to that in a weird way. Maybe they also feel trapped. Maybe all of us, you, Kelvin, and I, and maybe to some extent, my writer best friend also probably, felt trapped in a way. And anime kind of like, it represented like, okay, well, yeah, this is, it's almost like this is the imagination of somebody, this is like the stories or the fiction or the fantasies of an entire nation that is trapped and they want to be free and they express it through their art and their creativity. And then when there are like-minded people who resonate with that, it ends up being, popular. Ends up being something with it.
That's why Evangelion is such a hit series, because it sort of broke out of the norm from what I've heard and because I've actually never seen Evangelion before. Like, I kind of know the premise somewhat, but for some reason it's like the grandfather of all anime or something. I don't know. Like, I'd have to watch it and understand, but I've always seen it held in high praise, in high regard and stuff. But I mean, the anime that I've seen, it usually, or at least my favorite ones that I've seen so far, they usually tend to touch on very touchy subjects, or stuff that really makes you think. Like, that's why Bakemonogatari was probably one of my favorite series like ever, because
Bakemonogatari.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, my roommate just started introducing it to me, so I've watched the first season, all of it. I've watched the movies that bridged the first season to the second season, and I've started watching Nisei Monogatari.
There's definitely a lot, like Kura Monogatari, Nisei Monogatari, Kizu Monogatari. Yeah, there's just a whole bunch of stuff. But I really like how they present issues in certain things. So I guess I'll since it should be fresh on your mind, we'll just talk about the first arc, which is Hitagi Crab.
Oh yeah.
So Hitagi, or at least I should probably explain the premise. So Bakemonogatari essentially translates to stories of monsters.
Yes.
So it basically, every arc is about a person and their quote unquote, I wouldn't say spirit animal, but it's something like the animal kind of represents their burden.
Oh yes.
So the first character, Hitagi, that we run into, she weighs nothing. For some reason, she essentially is weightless, and she tried to kill herself, but the main character stopped her, and now he's kind of gotten involved in her affairs, and he's learned a little bit about her, and kind of tries to lend his hand, try and help solve her problem. So it turns out that, she's had some parental issues, and the parents were part of a cult, and they ended up owing the cult like a whole bunch of money and stuff. And the character, the story character of the arc didn't really take too well to that, and it kind of was haunting her all this time. So Um, I don't I don't know the lore behind the crab. I kind of forgot most of it, but essentially, like she had like her weight stolen by a crab, and it it like the things that kind of represent the freaking crab is this freaking stapler. Like the stapler is kind of the crab's claws, and you can see why. Like she is kind of crabby, honestly. Like she's tsundere, which is kind of standoffish, but she usually means well.
Hmm.
But the amount of motifs and representations of the crab is pretty phenomenal throughout the whole arc, and you kind of resonate with Hitagi because, like, you know, this feels like an actual story, like that could happen in real life. Like you could get involved in a cult, um, and bad things can happen if you don't really break out of it. So they end up seeing the main character's like former teacher or whatever. Well, I don't remember if it was his teacher exactly, but I would probably say he's more of a guardian.
Yeah.
So he, you know, he seems to have he seems like the guy that always has answers because he just knows about all these freaking myths and stuff about mystical creatures and whatnot. So he tells the girl Hitagi, you know, dress in all white. We're gonna expel this crab out of you, but you know, you just be wary. Like don't be afraid. Like it may be very daunting to you, but it can't hurt you. So you know she confronts her crab, her fears, and honestly, it's very scary. Like it's really weird when you see like something come out of you that kind of is you but isn't you, and it sort of represents like your burdens and stuff. So then when you start feeling the weight of like, you know, your actions or your past, your regrets, whatever, like it can be very scary. But she managed to pull through, and the neat twist is that freaking the girl Hitagi ends up going out with the main character, which is pretty cool to me. I mean, sure, it may sound a little bit cliche, but I really liked the whole story throughout. Like, as the stories go on, like you run into the monkey, Saruga monkey, and then Naruto snake, and I think there was one more, but there are more, like Karen B, Tsukihi Phoenix, but I can only really remember freaking Nautico Snake. But anyways, like I really like the philosophical. Oh wait, freaking Mayoi Snail. That's probably my favorite one.
The snail. Oh yeah.
The snail is probably my favorite one.
Hachikuchi.
Yeah, Hachikuji. She's probably my favorite story because she's like I just really like her story. She just wants to go home, but she's kind of lost in her situation, I guess. And it feels kind of weird because it sort of represents like humans to some extent. Like even though we know our destination, we kind of take the long way around, I guess, instead of like just take the straight way there. Like we'll make things a lot more complicated than needs to be. We'll kind of muddle ourselves with all these justifications and stuff. Like we don't need to do this or we don't need to do that or whatever. But just Hachikuji was definitely a bright character that really like set those, at least the first season for me. I didn't really care too much about Tsuruga Monkey that much. Nautico Snake was cool, but I think Mayoi Snail was probably my favorite.
Wow.
overall.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, no, like I think it's interesting because, Monogatari, it does talk about the trends of suffering, I guess, that multiple people go through. It's a perfect reflection of the state and the society of the nation itself. And what's interesting about it is that it it really does kind of when you look at your own life and you think about how it resonates with you as a person, it starts to really open up kind of um, the truth in a weird way to you. You start seeing it, and sometimes it's not pleasant when you see some of these characters go through all their pain that they have to go through, but it gives you a reflection of reality, and that reality, it kind of puts things into perspective for you, and that's how I feel like that's how wisdom is achieved, is when you're able to see something. Stories, I think, work the best way.
Yeah, stories are definitely by far the best way because we as people pretty much grew up on stories, and it's just very memorable to us when we see characters, go through their trials and tribulations to reach the end goal of whatever. And I mean, Disney stories are definitely probably one of the best examples. We can always remember Aladdin. He was just this random street rat, and then he got a genie in a lamp. Did his wishes to try and get the girl. Almost lost everything because there was a jelly Sultan's aid, but he still managed to pull on through. To which they spawned two different or two more sequels to it, where you have the return of the villain, and then you have freaking Aladdin's dad come into, and yeah, you can pretty much sum up a lot of where I can pretty much just say any name of a very popular story, you'll know, you'll remember the main gist of it, like let's see, what are some good examples? Ariel.
Yeah.
Yeah, she wanted to become a human. Then we can even say Sora from Kingdom Hearts. He just wanted to find his friends, and he traveled across multiple worlds to try and find them, and had to overcome the darkness. Yada yada yada. But I probably shouldn't bring video games into the equation
because it'll make us talk forever. Yeah, sure.
But
Okay.
I should probably say more generic stories, the rabbit and the turtle and the turtle and the hare. Man, what else? John Peter Pan. Peter Pan. Yeah, pretty much. Think of any story. You'll remember. You'll easily remember certain stuff, and actually no, I won't mention something else, but
Okay.
because it'll lead to something else. But yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, stories are just a really great medium in terms of just reminding you, hey, these characters are gonna overcome adversity, and you get very emotionally invested into it.
Hmm. Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Okay, cool. Okay, Okakura. So this section that we're reviewing next is listen to people who share intellectual common ground with, and I feel like it's really just about when you're talking to somebody, if they're speaking to you in a language you don't get, it's kind of hard to take them seriously. But for us, we like to talk about video games or anime. that's a language that we can understand. So if we bring up stories about anime or video games, then we're more apt to be like, oh yeah, that's right, no, I get it, kind of thing. I think that's what this section is all about. But I don't know. What did you think about that? Do you think that's pretty much the case? Do you have any objections to that, or do you think it's a fair argument?
It's a fair argument because I'm sort of diving into another field that I used to do, but it's a lot more in depth than what I remember. And it's definitely been opening my eyes in terms of like, this is how you can see it or whatever. And it's been a treat, I guess, just kind of learning some new lingo, I guess. But I won't mention what it is yet. I'm still in the middle of like, kind of learning it.
Right.
But yeah, it's a lot easier when people kind of speak the same language as you. Obviously, it's common sense. It's like, if you and I both speak English, we can understand each other. If I was speaking Mongolian or something, and you're speaking English, yeah, we wouldn't really be able to understand each other. We'd only really be able to use gestures and stuff.
Right.
That would probably be our best bet to try and understand each other. And I'm pretty sure back in the Stone Age or something, when they had to kind of do that to communicate, like, hey, I want to do something, I'm hungry. At least that's what I think happened. But
yeah, and you know what's interesting? Coming from a background of teaching language and everything, I realized something, is that language is about agreeing to certain words meaning certain things. So when I say anime, like, the people that speak my language, they know what anime is, and when you get deeper into it, you realize that even though we can be saying the same thing, so I can say anime and you can be like, okay, anime, some people, when they think of anime, they'll think of Bleach or Naruto, and you might be thinking of something completely different. You might be thinking about what's something completely different than that? Like one of those slice of life, K-On! Anime. So even within language itself, people have different views on the actual word. And because of that, when people say, you speak my language, it's not just like, oh yeah, we're both speaking English, but it's like, even the nuance of the words that we're using, we come in agreement with. So it's like, if we speak anime, obviously we don't just think like Pokemon or something. We think of the broader, like, anime, like, as a wide range of different things, So, yeah, I think that helps, because then you don't have to correct someone all the time and be like, actually, I meant this, or actually, I meant that. So yeah, I think it's interesting. Last tidbit before we move on to the other section. Did you know that it seems like men and women have different languages? Like, even if you speak, the same language, certain things that men say and certain things women say are vastly different from each other. And that's why sometimes there's a lot of arguments in the beginning of a relationship, because even though you're communicating and saying the same words, what those words mean to you are completely different. So yeah, just wanted to throw that in. So, okay, we'll put a close on that. Next section: listen to people who share your goals. This is interesting because it's like, she talks about a Catholic and an atheist, that team up because they want to, make the world a better place, and because they still, they see each other as teammates, they're more willing to consider each other's opposite point of view. Um, I don't think this is very breakthrough. I think it makes sense for the most part. But I wanted to just ask you, anyways, do you see anything deeper with this, or do you think it kind of speaks for itself?
It should speak for itself.
Okay, yeah, I think so. I honestly feel that if aliens attacked the world, we would all band together to defeat the aliens, and it wouldn't matter racism, genderism, ageism, whatever. Like, we'd want to survive, and yeah, we'd be more willing to cooperate with each other. So, yeah, I think that's that. Okay, now this one was a little bit more nuanced, and I may need your kind of like thoughts on this because I didn't quite. I don't. I think. It's yeah. This is something I'm more curious about, but the problem with a team of rivals, and this is talking about Abraham Lincoln. Um, I don't know. Like, I didn't quite understand this concept as clearly, but what did you make of it, and what's your interpretation of this one?
Um, I think what Lincoln was trying to do was, having a bunch of opposition and stuff would actually like kind of be helpful in the long run. Like people would actually start seeing everyone's like the other side's views and stuff, and they could actually generate a lot of discussion and whatever.
Mm.
Except it sort of backfired
Huh.
because people weren't really willing to, give anyone else like ground in terms of their views and whatnot. So it's just like it, it definitely was a dumb move in retrospect, but the intention was in my eyes very clear. Like he wanted people to kind of push push each other.
Ah.
Like he want like we were mentioning earlier in the podcast, like opposition is supposed to make you grow and some whatnot. Competition, yada yada. However, in this case, these people didn't really back down. Like they weren't really being productive with their competition.
Mm.
Like competition is supposed to be a way for you to kind of grow in different ways. But in politics, like how exactly are you supposed to grow?
Huh.
Like it doesn't really help anyone honestly, because everyone's just going to be at each other's throats because you don't see things my way, yada yada. Like I mean, we still have freaking Democrats and Republicans for whatever reason. Like it's okay, but like has it really gotten us anywhere? Like what's the difference between a Democratic president and a Republican president anyways? Like there's usually pros and cons to each party. Like, maybe some will take more action. Obviously, freaking Trump did his tax cuts during his tenure, and people like that. But I mean, it's really hard to say like what benefits like having these two opposing parties has as opposed to like Olympic competition. Like these people, like when you think of like competition in the Olympics, like these people are trying to be number one. Like it's a valid goal. It's a worthy goal, and obviously your competition is also trying to get number one. And they'll actually start pushing each other, and they don't even in terms of just like just physical abilities and whatnot, just because like there are other people that can actually do the things you do, and you're trying to kind of get a one up on them, depending on your physique or whatever, or apparently there's actually been some luck into play. There's been luck factored into it as well. Like if you had like a huge backwind in the when we were talking about like Usain Bolt, like he had like a really nice tailwind or something that gave him the extra boost to, pull out on top or something.
Huh.
And yeah, like that kind of competition is great because you actually have a clear goal of becoming number one. Like you want to be the best. But in terms of politics, like you just want to be right.
Ah,
and
interesting.
there's no concrete way of saying like you're right. You're not trying to be the best. You just want to be right.
Well, yeah. I think you're really hitting on to something because at least when you're racing, you can measure who's faster. But in a debate of logic, how can you score points and be like, oh yeah, he's the winner because he scored more points? Like, it's all subjective, isn't it? So then at that point, winning a debate is only it's up to the person who's observing and who they are, and it's very no matter what, it's going to be biased in a way because you can never really win, right? I guess that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. It's just politics. You don't really have a clear goal. Like no one's really trying to be number one. You're just trying to kind of force your views to be right. Like you're trying to not get the other party to see your way, but you're just trying to get your agenda, whatever it is, down. Like you saw how the opposition towards stimulus checks was very very heated, and it took them like months to actually get for them to decide like, oh yeah, we'll do the second round, the third round, the fourth round. Well, they're in talks of the fourth round, but yeah, it took them forever just to get the second and third rounds going. Even though there are some clear indicators of Americans actually needing the help and whatnot, and it's just like why? I guess it's like people or political parties have their different views on pretty much everything in the political sphere. When it comes to spending, national debt, infrastructure is the current hot topic. Foreign affairs, international relations,
Yeah.
And it's good to some degree, just because obviously it would be a little boring if everything was, I guess, a dictatorship, aka China. But is it so bad? I mean, who knows? Maybe it could be better, since we wouldn't have to worry about, opposing oppositions in terms of, the Democratic and Republican parties. Like, we wouldn't have to deal with all these clickbait stuff. We wouldn't have to deal with a lot of adult playgrounding, as what I like to call it. But yeah, but back to the main point of Lincoln and his group of rivals and whatever. They pretty much, the majority of them quit because they kind of saw that they pretty much weren't going to get a headwind because Lincoln in the end is the one that has the final say anyways, since he's the president. So why exactly would I need to waste time being a part of his cabinet where I can say something but potentially he wouldn't even listen to me? We talked about people being stubborn and not really giving the other side a chance of listening in, and it's pretty much a prime time example. It's just why would Lincoln have to listen to me? He's just I would assume that they would think he's just freaking using me he's just playing me as a fool.
Or, yeah, you're right. Or he's exploiting me for my ideas, and he's gonna take credit for it.
I mean, you can see it that way, but
Yeah.
it's definitely a probable angle. So it's just like, and like he can essentially use that group of rivals for like literally anything.
Mm.
But I mean, in the end, like the majority of them left anyway. So
That's interesting.
yeah, I guess it didn't really accomplish the goal that I would imagine that Lincoln had for it.
What do you think about Seward, who he was in the beginning? He was actually pretty influential. He was pretty influential, and he changed Lincoln's mind a few times. But then, when push came to shove, he tried to undermine Lincoln and pull a fast one on him. You know, like, I guess the danger of rivals is maybe they want to take your power and, you know, like take your throne. So maybe that's also a reason why you don't want to keep them too close. Or I don't know. They say that keep your friends close, keep your enemies closer. But in this case, maybe not keep your enemies too close.
No, it still applies because Lincoln was Seward's end. Yeah, keep Lincoln close, and you know you can make your move. I mean, it was pretty popular in the Japanese feudal era, like the whole shogun thing. It's just like, yeah, you know, I'll grant you, you know, these pieces of land, and then they get exiled anyways. I think that was Nobunaga, or
Wow.
it was one of the shoguns. Like they had, you know, they actually performed their duty, but then they got kicked out because someone else wanted it. So it's just like, well, I did all that work. I did freaking, you know, I freaking carried you all the way over here. I got you your land, and now my reward is being exiled. Well, then what the hell is this shit? This is why, like, you can't really trust anyone in politics usually unless like you actually like bribe them or something.
Oh, interesting. Especially when it comes to power plays and playing that game where it's all about power. Because if you know it's a game about power, you know that's the name of the game, and people are going to use their power. They're going to exploit their power. They're going to try to, you know, squeeze as much power as they can, out there. And yeah, dog eat dog world basically. So, the only person that I feel like he seemed like such a peaceful person who was trying to run for president is this is on the conservative side, but the last guy who was standing, what's his name? Kasich? He was like the only person who was not confrontational, and all the other conservatives that were going up against Donald Trump, Ben Carson, Chris Christie, there was all these guys who kept falling. Marco Rubio, they all kept falling, and this guy was the last guy standing, and the only reason why he was standing was that he was never putting anybody down. He was being like the most peaceful. And I was like, that's so interesting. Kasich, I think his name was, or whatever. But in the end, like, obviously, if you don't have the aggression, then you're not gonna, become the nominee. So I was very curious about him, actually. He was a very interesting person. But yeah, team of rivals. Would you, yeah, so going back really quick before we continue on, going back to keep your friends close but keep your enemies closer, you would agree that, yes, keep your enemies closer because they could backstab you, so you want to be careful?
It's more that you can sort of keep an eye on them, and that you can pretty much execute them whenever you need to, because you make them, you give them a false sense of comfort.
Oh.
Since they think that you don't know what they're up to.
Oh.
But the thing is that you have a one up on them. So if they try to do anything funny, you can just be like, execute him, and
Ah.
people won't really say anything about it just because you they you kind of established like this guy might be a threat. So yes, let's just keep them close. Like that's
Oh, so you can execute them. I get it. I see. Oh.
it's like a common trend, I guess, in video games. Like the person you least expect, or at least like, well, I wouldn't say video games, but
Mm-hmm.
like murder mysteries or like killers or whatever. Usually, if you want to bring like one of the biggest amounts of suspense or whatever, it's usually someone you usually don't expect. Usually, someone that you think is trustworthy, you think is blah blah blah. They kind of fool your expectations,
Huh.
but it turns out like, oh, they were the killer all along, or they're the evil mastermind, like that kind of thing.
Oh. So, you know what? It can be a reversal then, because the criminal, his enemy is the hero. So he keeps really close to the hero to the point where the hero doesn't even suspect him. And that can be a reversal, right? That the enemy is keeping the protagonist very close, so he can keep an eye on him.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Like,
Ah.
why not? Because you don't really have anything to lose outside of um yeah, you really don't have anything to lose
Hmm.
because if your main enemy is the hero, then you want him dead, like you want him gone.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what better way than to just keep an eye on them? Like the same goes for the hero. Like if I keep the villain close, then he won't do anything that he shouldn't be able to do. Anything
Ah.
that would be out of my range.
Death
Out of my
Note.
reach.
Death Note. Death Note. You've
Well,
watched Death Note, right?
I only watched like up to a certain point, and then I just dropped it because I wasn't really a fan of it.
Okay. Okay.
But
Oh gosh. Yeah.
I remember the main premise is just like, yeah, freaking Light and L doing their thing, and it's just like, well, they did interact, but Light had the upper hand because he's actually a lot more cunning than what people gave him for,
Huh.
and yeah, like he was able to kind of wreak havoc because he played his cards right. Like people would never suspect this freaking loser kid, or I don't think it was a loser kid, but this nice kid that
Hmm.
to actually do these sorts of things.
Yeah. And they were basically like in the same building, working on the same case together. And but yeah, that's how one of them was able to kill the other because they kept the other person really close. So that's so interesting. That is actually wow. That is really well um, uh, put into uh, action with that anime. So that's awesome. So okay, I think we're gonna go through the next few sessions and then sections, and then yeah, we'll have a wrap. So here we go. Okay, so for this next section here, we misunderstand each other's views. Uh, this one's talking about when you get a 30-second spiel of somebody else's argument. Um, you can assume so many things and you can write them off really quick. Um, I think this is, yeah, like definitely something that's a pitfall for a lot of people. Um, and I think it kind of speaks for itself. Um, your thoughts, Okakura? What do you think about this?
I mean, we always misunderstand everything.
Hmm.
That's what creates conflicts in the first place. That's what creates arguments. It's just misunderstandings. Like
You're right.
it's very
Yeah.
it's very hard, I guess, to try and get people to see your point of view sometimes. Um, I'm sure you've had your fair share of arguments with me because you know, you're trying to get her to see things in your way, but she's just not having it because, she's very stuck in her ways. Like, the same can be reversed. Like, she tries to get you to see something her way, and you don't want to budge because either you don't agree with it, or you just want to be the man of the relationship. You want to be the one wearing the pants in the relationship. Like, it's like it can be a whole array of issues that kind of generate these misunderstandings, whether it be pride, whether it just be misinformation. That definitely happens a lot. It could be, um, you know, I think that's the big thing. It's usually misinformation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's very hard to actually
communicate all those details. I guess like the way that I look at it is that if you've researched something for like 10 years and then you tell somebody who's also researched something for like 10 years or whatever, but it was the opposite, and you say, well, my point is this, like, the other person doesn't know how in depth you've been with your investigation, so when you say it, they might just be like, no, that's just wrong because it's wrong. And on the flip side, they might put something in front of you, but you don't know their past. It's the same thing with misunderstanding. Like, me and my wife can get into like an argument, but I don't know that the reason why she believes what she believes is because 15 years ago, when she was, I don't know, in school, something happened to her, and this is why she believes this. But I have no idea. I have like no idea that she went through this. So I kind of make an assumption, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, blah blah blah. But there's something much deeper to it, and I think sometimes this is why I ask a lot of questions, is because if something strikes me as really funny or awkward or odd, like if like with our podcast with Kelvin last time, it's like, oh yeah, anime is bad for you. If someone said that, I'd be like, why? Like, wait, what? Like, okay, there must be some reason why you believe that. Why? But I think people, they don't trust that. They just think people are stupid and they have no reason. They're like, oh, they're just gullible, or oh, huh, they believe that crazy stuff. Whatever. I'm gonna
And
write.
it's the people who say video games are bad for you, even though like video games are actually good for you, to some degree.
Huh.
I wouldn't say.
Interesting.
I wouldn't say it's. It depends on the games you play, but for the most part, if you play the correct games,
Huh.
it can actually be good for you. Specifically puzzle games, which I love puzzle games, but they actually do test. They actually do push certain things that you can't really learn anywhere else.
Oh.
Because they're video games. Like, they teach you about cognitive thinking. They teach you about critical judgment.
Huh.
They can teach you about,
I think of like reserving rations. Like, in order to survive, you have to have enough potions. It's like lots of micromanagement skills. Like, how many potions do I need to bring with me on this quest? Then that means how much money do I have to earn, and what level do I have to be? What armor do I have to equip? What sword must I buy? And because your main goal is like, we gotta defeat the boss, but there's so many things you have to do in order to defeat the boss. That you kind of like, yeah, it's like what you said. It teaches critical thinking, because now you're like, wait, in order to do this, I got to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, and you're really just, you want to defeat the boss, but there's way more you have to manage in order to get there, kind of thing.
yeah. So even though people have been like, the media has been saying video games are bad for you, they teach you about violence and stuff. Why, yes, they can.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the whole picture. Like, you're kind of seeing it in a narrow view, like, oh, GTA 5 is really bad because, you steal cars, you kill people. Like, yeah, like, you do that, but, like, you kind of play by a different set of rules, and you kind of have to do different things anyways in the game. Like, it really depends on how you play it. GTA 5 is definitely something you would have to... You kind of play by your own rules.
Right.
Outside of, like, obviously doing bad things will get you arrested by the cops.
Right.
So, obviously, you kind of play around it. Like, you learn to be creative in terms of, like, oh, this is how I'm going to steal the car. This is how I'm going to do the mission. Like, same thing with what you were saying about, how do we defeat this boss? Well, we can go at it at multiple angles. That's why speedrunning is always really amusing to watch. Like, really amazing to watch, because these players have come up with unique strategies to play within the game's rules and also kind of break the rules too.
Oh,
like
interesting.
For example, like the biggest example being freaking Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Like, they have that game beaten in under 20 minutes.
Goodness.
And it's great. Like when it first released, people definitely enjoyed it and thought like it would take a long time to beat. But then they started learning about how the game works. They started learning how you could do, reverse bottle adventure.
Oh.
Like you can start manipulating data. You could start, warping from. You could actually change the warp loading zones from like when you beat a boss, you're supposed to warp outside of the dungeon to kind of indicate like, okay, you're done. But they learned that you could actually change the warp point to pretty much wherever you want.
Huh.
So you could warp to another dungeon.
Oh my gosh.
You could warp into a cutscene.
Whoa.
But obviously
Whoa.
the goal of a speedrun is to complete the game. So they just warp straight to the credits. But they learned that took too much time anyway.
What?
So
wow.
Yeah, because you needed certain items to actually get there.
Oh.
And namely, like, you needed Ferori's Wind, which is... I forgot where you got it, but it was, like, halfway into the game. That took too long. And in a speed run, you're, like, every second matters, and you're trying to beat the game as quickly as possible within the rules that the community has set. Because there are some other things that, kind of go above and beyond what is normally supposed to be, set as precedent. But then they just make different categories for it. That's why Legend of Zelda has, like, any %, which is the fastest amount.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have 100%, where you have to get every item, you get every heart, every Skulltula, everything. Like, all the upgrades, all the medallions. And they created, like, some great strategies to do so. So, yeah, like, to me, it's just like, yeah, that's great. Like, freaking video games can be very helpful to you. And, obviously, like, another good example is just learning a different language. Like, me playing a bunch of games in Japanese, it actually taught me how to learn Japanese a lot faster. Because I forced myself to read the letters, the kanji that it's sent to me, and I was just like, well, shit. Like, it's not in English, it's something I'm familiar with, but it's in the target language that I want to reach, and I have a goal. I'm going to come up with some unique strategies to, I'm going to learn this kanji like this and that, and lo and behold, I can play through a lot of Japanese games in a general sense. Like, there are definitely some, holes here and there, I'll admit. But for the most part, I can navigate menus. I know what my goal is. And that's really essentially all I really need to know. I don't need specifics. If I want to learn the specifics, I can always, do the research and translate it so that I can actually understand it. But for the most part, like, playing through, imported games, or changing the freaking game language to Japanese is always fun for me, because I get to, test how far my knowledge goes. So, I mean, it's,
Yeah. No, I think that again, like coming back to what the book is talking about, like that is a great example of how, you know, you can see somebody who like looks at video games and they misunderstand because they're like, oh, video games are just about shooting people. It's all about violence. It's all about, you know, uh, that's it. It's a child thing. It's for children, but they don't know all these things that you know, and because they don't know it, sometimes hearing you now, if somebody heard what you were saying, they might be like, "Holy shit! Well, I guess video games actually do have a good, you know, there's a reason for it." But the problem is that, like, usually if somebody introduces an idea, they only spend 30 seconds, like, explaining it. Like, so for example, in your case, you went above and beyond and you were like, no, this is, like, these are the specifics. But somebody else would be like, well, video games are good because you learn management skills. And people would be like, uh-huh, managing how to kill people? Okay, yeah, whatever. You know, like, and that's where people misunderstand because they don't know the nuances. They don't know the nuances. And I think IQ is based on sensory acuity, and sensory acuity is based on how much you're able to split one concept from another. So like, do you know like the different colors of blue? Like you could say, yeah, my shirt is blue, but if you say my shirt is indigo blue, or my shirt is baby blue, or my shirt is cerulean, I don't even know if that's blue, but let's say it is blue, then like, oh, now I know to what degree, now I know what you mean when you say blue, like it's this particular blue. And I think that's what nuance is in language. It's like telling people, no, this is exactly what I think. Now can you see what I'm talking about? And when people are like, oh yeah, I, yep, okay, I totally get it. That works. Like, for example, if I said the word, I said the sentence, I see a tree. And you're like, okay, I see a tree. But then it's like, well, what kind of tree? Like, for me, I'd have to know what tree am I talking about in the first place? Is it an oak tree that I'm thinking about? Or is it a maple tree? And you have to even know, like, what the hell a maple tree looks like or what an oak tree looks like. You might be looking at a maple tree, but you don't know that's a maple tree. And you're like, yeah, I see a tree. And then you say, okay, I can imagine that. I see a tree. But your tree is a completely different tree. Or maybe it's an old tree. Or maybe it's a young tree. Maybe it's a baby tree. Maybe it's a tree that got chopped in half. Like, there's so much nuance. So when somebody says, I see a tree, you can't really understand to, like, perfectly unless you're able to use explicit words that say, I see a dead tree that I can only see the trunk of. It's maybe only 2 feet off the ground, and there's like, I don't know, pus or whatever it's called, like kind of like from the corners of the left side of it when I'm looking at it from northwest or something like that. And then people are like, oh, okay, I see the tree that you see. But usually people don't go that into detail about what they're seeing, so the other person sees something completely different. And that's what I think is interesting. And again, when you explain video games and the benefits of it, those are the things that everybody misses when someone says, "Do you think video games are good or bad?" I'm like, "Bad." I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. And in the same respect, if you asked a scientist why are video games bad, they might have a whole list of things too to say about that. Like, oh well, because we studied what happens to the brain and it shrinks over the years, or because you're you have such high stimulus, like your brain releases endorphins at a abnormal rate, and it causes like muscular degeneration of the brain or blah blah blah. Like they might have a good point too, but if they just say playing video games is bad, then we can't see what they see unless they explicitly explain like, well, this is why, and then we can be like, oh, okay, I can understand that, like it overstimulates the brain and that has side effects. Okay, that's not why I think it's bad or why I think it's good, but now I can see why you think it's bad. Um, or they'll say like playing video games has an effect on one's view of reality, and that is why there are people who are more socially inept because they play too much video games or something like that. And you're like, interesting, huh? And it's just stuff like that. So I think that's why, going back to the book, people misunderstand each other. It's because they're not seeing what the other person sees. Um, that actually segues to the next section, actually, which is bad arguments inoculate us against good arguments. Is that you hear somebody that argued for, I don't know, Christianity or something, and they just had such a BS kind of like reason, like you should believe in God because He created us, and if you don't believe in Him, you go to hell. So you should believe in God. Then it's like, okay, I'm dismissing Christianity. These guys are whatever. And then when somebody actually does come along and has like really good evidence, you're like, oh, it's a Christian dude. Ah, okay, forget it. Um, I think that's a bias. Like if you come to somebody and they kind of like trigger a memory that you had of somebody who was really bad at arguing. Um, so that's how I think about it. Um, in terms of this, the only question that I might want to ask you and ask your opinion about is the idea of, like, we're saying bad arguments, but what constitutes bad arguments exactly, do you think? Um, and
To be honest, I don't think there's a bad argument per se.
huh.
It's
Oh!
really subjective.
Oh, you mean, are you, sorry, I'm kind of trying to figure it out, but I think you mean there's no bad argument, there's just bad presentation?
I guess it's just I never really see a point of an argument to some degree, just because you're just trying to prove who's right, and to me, being right isn't that important to me.
Mm-hmm.
To other people, it can be very important, and I guess when I want to feel right, when I want to feel like I have the upper hand, yeah, I would definitely argue, but a majority of the time, I'm just like, does it really mean it that much to me? Not really, because, when you get into an argument, you kind of put a lot of things on the table that you kind of don't want to take off, because, you're starting to get invested into this conversation, and you want to try and come out of it, like, on top. And the author had mentioned, like, every time you get into an argument, do you feel like do you come out angry? Do you come out like you actually learned something? It just usually feels bad when you get into an argument and you guys can't really come to a conclusion of like, oh, I fucked up, or maybe I'm just not understanding your point of view the way I should be, I guess, or I don't know. It can be a multitude of things, but
Wow.
But I guess looking at an argument just as an argument is just, well, what is the goal of an argument? That's how I am currently looking at, you know, what the author is presenting it as. It's just like, okay, so what is the end goal of an argument? Just to prove that you're right, to prove that you have the upper hand. Like, I mean, that is the goal, right? When you get into an argument.
Oh gosh, or maybe that you're intellectually superior than somebody else.
Yeah, like you just want to be the better. You want to be the one that's right. Like it doesn't really matter like about all the extra stuff, the specifics or whatever. Like the whole point of an argument is to try and get something clarified, whether it be, you know, their point, your point, or just like a point. But I guess I never really see the point of it. Like, it's not to say it's bad, because sometimes it can be good on some degree, because people do need to discuss certain things, and sometimes arguments will maybe potentially spawn like a different problem, which might not be the solution that you're looking for, but at least you got something out of it. Hopefully something good.
Gosh.
And
yeah.
I mean that would be how I would try and approach arguments. Like, I want to get something good out of it. Like, I want to, like, maybe a different point of view that I haven't really considered before, or maybe I can convince them to see things my way, which I would like to do that. But if they're too stubborn to not accept my views or whatever, then I wouldn't get into that argument in the first place. But yeah, like an argument, like I just want to know like what exactly is the goal, like what's the end point for both of us. Like, I guess if we argue, like what do we both want to get out of it? To be honest, I couldn't tell you. Like, I don't know what I would want out of it. I don't know if you would want anything out of it.
I mean,
it just sounds dumb to me. Like, why would we get into an argument in the first place when we usually discuss things? Like, that's usually what you want to do. You want to discuss things, but then it can get heated because, you know, you might feel kind of threatened that your views might be wrong. Some people might not be able to accept them.
That is a good question you put out there. Like, what would I be arguing with you about? Like, why would I want to argue with you unless I wanted to pick a fight with you? And I was like, well, Okakura, well, I'm better than you at this, so I'm going to argue with you. I mean, even when we're playing Super Smash, I don't feel like we're arguing more than we're testing theories and seeing what works and, like, what's most effective. You know, like, that's really what it is. It's more like a mind game where, you know. But I don't know. Like, do you think that, like, playing Super Smash, like a fighting game, counts as an argument?
Well, it's more of a duel to me. Like, if you're fighting game, like, you're dueling the other person in terms of ability, not philosophical views.
Right,
well,
right.
I mean, you could argue that you could be fighting for, like, oh, my way of playing is better, or whatever. But, like, your goal is to win. Like, that's why you're playing a fighting game. You want to win. Sometimes you're there to learn. If you're practicing for a tournament, that's fair. But I guess when it comes tournament time, like, people who compete in tournaments, they're not gonna tell you, like, oh, I'm just here to, you know, I'm just here to play. I just want to have fun. Like, that's what normal people would say. But if you're a top competitor, you're there to win. Like, you want to get number one. Like, I've never heard anyone, a true competitor, say, I want to get second place. I want to get third place. No, I want to get number one because I want to prove that I'm the best. Like, it doesn't matter, you know, if you hate me or not, if you don't like the character I play, if you don't like if you don't like my play style, but I'm gonna win. Like that's the whole point of a competition, is to win.
Right, that's true. And there's so much that goes into Super Smash. There's so many little things that we are not even aware about, that these masters, they're like Mango, I believe, he like keeps tabs of the little quirks that happen when you're at like 48.7%. Like, oh, at 48.7%, if I use this attack from this distance, like it'll knock him back this degree instead of the usual degree, and I could use that to my advantage because then I could chain combo him, and then like there's all these like, it's like freaking calculus, but like they're able to do that like over and over and over again, like to a really deep degree. And like, yeah, maybe it's just a show of like a flex kind of thing, like, oh, these are my muscles, I'm using them, or this is how fast I can calculate, see if you can beat me, kind of thing. But yeah, it's different than arguing logic, because you can't, I feel like you can have well calculated responses and everything, but in the end it's still um well well maybe you can destroy somebody in an argument. Like, let's say a Christian and an atheist, go up against each other, and the atheist just destroys the Christian or whatever. I mean, I guess it's possible, but all the same, I think that you know a bad argument versus a good argument. If we were to compare it to like Super Smash, what is a bad fight versus a good fight? A good fight is when everybody knows the ins and outs of their character. They know their stance really well, and they're going up against somebody else who is really the same way but just evenly matched. Um, versus bad players that fight each other, like it kind of yeah, it's funny just thinking about that, but yeah, yeah, so makes sense. Um, all right, let's move on to the third thing that makes it hard for people to understand each other. This one I feel by far is the most fascinating to me, because the author mentions that in order to change one belief, you're not just asking somebody to change one belief. You're asking them to change a web of beliefs. So somebody who admits to climate change, if they're like conservative and they don't believe in climate change, then they're kind of like, they know, like, if I agree to climate change, then I'm also agreeing that being Republican is wrong, or whatever. So it's like deep rooted, and that's why it's also super hard for people to let go of an idea, because maybe their father told them something long ago, and they have to hold this true to them, and somebody says, nope, that's not true, and then now it's like, wait, you're asking me to go back on what my father told me, or like, how about that one time I remember I mean, like, there's so many things that are rooted with things. So asking somebody to change one thing might be super hard, because it's interconnected. That is a new insight that I got from this chapter, because I never really thought about it like that. I never really did. So, yeah, for example, it's like if somebody proved that video games were bad for you, then that would also kind of almost say your way of living is bad for you. And that's something that is a very hard thing that to uproot if you've been living a successful life, or you have a happy life, and then somebody says video games are bad for you. And you're like, ha ha, really? No, thank you. So, I think it's interesting. Um, so, that makes things a lot deeper for me when I think about uh, talking to people about things. I never saw it like that. For you, though, is this something that, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I saw this as kind of a revelation. But what do you think?
Uh, uh, I think the way I see it is that everyone's beliefs are like a stack of cards.
Uh,
Like you pretty much just take a card from the bottom and it just comes crashing down.
ooh, ooh. Okay, yeah, I
Like
see.
that beliefs are essentially stacks of cards. Like you'll write certain things about them. Like okay, so climate change bad. Like freaking Republicans bad. Trump bad. Afghanistan's bad. Coronavirus bad. But like when people present to you stuff in a way that is kind of logical, sensical, and actually kind of intuitive, I guess it just kind of triggers something in their brain where it's just like, wait, I've been taught wrong. I think one of people's greatest weaknesses is probably that they can't admit when they're wrong.
Uh,
People tend to have a bias of like, I guess, yeah, people tend to have certain biases on certain things, and people just like being right, and it's fair. Like, who doesn't like being right? Who doesn't like being on top? Who doesn't like being number one? Like, you can't tell me that. I think I've mentioned this before, that no one wants to be a loser,
oh,
like ever, and it's what I was mentioning earlier. Like in competition, you don't go up to a competitor and say like, or as a competitor, you wouldn't say, "I'm here to take second place." No, I'm here to take first. Like people don't want to settle for less. Like they want the best. They want to be on top. Like whatever. So naturally, like when your beliefs get challenged, like it's like a stack of cards. Like you take one card out, just comes crumbling down. Like you just
ooh.
it's just an avalanche of like, oh shit.
I,
Like I just realized
I,
that
I,
I
yeah.
could be wrong.
I think you're getting to something here. Actually, give me 1 second. Let me pause this really quick. Okay, so getting back to this whole idea of like not settling and getting the best. I know that when you dubbed and you released well for SAO, because that's what we were talking about just a while ago. But with SAO, you had to find the best Asuna, and it's kind of like what happens with auditions. I feel is that you don't want the person who's like second best. You want the person who fits your vision. And for somebody, you were a director, a producer, you made your works. When you settled on your characters, you made sure that they were damn the best near impressions that you could possibly get.
Yeah, I guess it was to some degree since it was my own personal project. I mean, I can't really say it's the same for professional stuff, just because like they might have different things in mind. Like they might want someone reliable than someone like just someone random.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really been listening to too many like English dubs recently, but back in the day, like it was pretty much the same group of people for like everything. I think it still is the same today.
Kind of, yeah, kind of.
But I mean, it's fair because you know what they're capable of and that they're reliable. You don't really want to come up to you don't really want to go to a new talent that's untested and them just like kind of flopping, and then you kind of have to come up with a contingency plan or something like that. Like if you have a free project like what I did when I used to fan dub,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, then I had the time to go through a bunch of demo reels. Like I went through a whole bunch of demo reels at YouTube, just trying to find like I'm looking for something specific. Like I'm looking for very kind of feminine, kind of raspy, a little manly, but not too. It's like a very fine line of like
Interesting.
like that was what I was going for with Asuna. Like it was, it's both. It's a little manly, but also feminine. Like it was a very fine line. But I think the
Interesting.
raspiness is what kind of caught me to what I settled with, just because like just listening through, I just kind of had an idea of like, okay, yeah, this is definitely what I want. Same thing went for Klein. Same thing went for Yui.
Yeah. I do have a question because this is more of like a perspective thing. Because you said that you want Asuna to have like sort of a manly kind of like vibe, or like a quality that's manly. I'm curious because there's so many different ways you can define manly, and for me, when I think manly, I'm thinking like, I don't know, maybe, gosh, who's a good, I think of like the old gruff kind of voice, but then again, it's like, okay, but what? Um,
Well, I probably shouldn't have said manly. I should have probably said more like tomboy.
oh, okay, tomboy. Okay, I got you.
Tomboy is probably more accurate. Like that was what I was going for. I mean, it's definitely personal preference, just because that's how I saw Asuna as a character.
Oh,
Like she had her feminine quirks, but I think she was more of a tomboy.
right,
Um,
right.
on occasion, because like when they first introduced her, you weren't really sure if she was a boy or a girl,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
but as time grew, like you kind of figured like, oh, she's definitely a girl. Um, and she had her goal of like doing the game thing, like why she was in the game, like what her goals were, and it's actually kind of funny because we were talking about this earlier. Like Kirito actually got her to see like, even if this is a game, you can kind of treat, you can still be relaxed and do stuff the way you want to. Like you don't have to be all mission, mission, mission. Like we have to keep clearing so we can get out of the game. Like we'll still have the end goal of like reaching the top floor and beating the game, but we can do things at our own pace. We can relax when we need to, and that was probably one of the more fun clips to do. I guess one of the more memorable clips as well. Just freaking sleeping in the fields, and then also coming up and being all like, "What the hell? Like you're a frontliner. Like why the hell are you resting here?" I'm just like, I just want to relax because I can. Like, why not just take the time to relax? And then she ends up sleeping there too, and then Kirito had to watch over her, and then she got all mad. She's just like, fine, I'll give you one meal for watching over me. So that was like the start of their relationship. Well, actually, I think it was a little bit earlier, but it was, I guess, one of the more memorable things in terms of like their interactions, because I definitely dubbed a bunch of other clips with Asuna, like highlights here, making a sandwich, going to your house, um, doing the family thing with Yui, also fighting monsters on floors, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. But I mean, back to the main point. It's just how I saw like every character that I wanted, every character for all the clips that I wanted to do. Like I definitely had to think like, okay, so who would I really want? Like I guess I wanted to try some new talents, since at the time like I had a really reliable group of friends that I could just ask and be all like, hey, can you do a couple lines for me, or can you do some filler stuff? And I kind of wanted to explore some new talents and kind of expand my group of contacts. And yeah, like it's kind of weird thinking about it in retrospect, because I actually got to work with some famous people right now. Like not to mention any names right now, but yeah, like it's
My wife. No, just kidding.
And,
Flex. No,
but
just kidding.
but yeah, like being able to kind of have the freedom to choose what you want and how, like, see your vision and stuff.
Mm.
Like, I wanted to make sure, like, that was actually I can make that into reality. But
Yeah, it's
I guess we're straying a bit from the main point, which I actually forgot what we were talking about in the first place.
Oh yeah, no, that's totally fine. But yeah, we were talking about a stack of cards, and beliefs are like a stack of cards. You pull one out and everything falls. And you're talking about, like, in terms of, like, people arguing, because a lot of people, they'll argue and do things. Nobody likes to be proven wrong, or nobody wants to be wrong. And then you mentioned how, proof of that is that when you go to a race, nobody wants second place. You always want first place. And then we go into, like, casting calls, where you're like, just like with an audition, like, there's specific people that you want because they fit this specific role, and this is your vision, and this is why it. Here we go. And that is why, ultimately, that you choose what you choose. And I guess it's the same thing with our beliefs too. Like, for you, you believed that whoever you cast for Asuna, you believed she is the best Asuna. And people may have debated with you and been like, oh, well, you think so? Blah, 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 blah. But, again, with arguments, sometimes it's subjective. It's just like, nobody can say who's the best Asuna but yourself. For you, who is the best Asuna? Only you know, and you will choose that. So when people challenge you and they say you're wrong, then you're going to hold firm to your belief. And sometimes, if you own that belief, where you're like, this is what I want, this is like, then nobody can really touch that, because it's a preference. It's not based on logic or fact. It has nothing to deal with, climate change. It just has to deal with, this is your truth. Your truth is that this is the best asana for you, and nobody can change your mind except you. That's it. And I feel like it's the same way, even for me. If I told other people, like, hey, these are my top 5 friends, my best friends, you, Kelvin, and then again the other two, the writer best friend and the entrepreneur best friend, and I mention them, somebody might look at all of you guys and be like, wait, they can't be your best friend. Like, why do you make them your best friend? Like, obviously one is blah blah blah, the other is blah blah blah. And it's like, well, yeah, like, you can criticize all day, but in the end, it's, I'm kind of like, my friends that I have, I've chosen them because they are who contribute the most to me living a better life and me enjoying my life, or me understanding my life. And if you set the parameters, it's all you. It's all you, basically. So that's what I have to say about that. Now, in terms of the stacked card thing, what I thought was interesting is you mentioned that, and the author mentions a pastor that wrote a book. The book, I can give a quick reference for it. The book basically said, don't have sex until you're married. That's it. And it was a very good book. And in the beginning, everyone's like, oh my gosh, I love this book. This is great. I'm going to follow this. And then 15 years later, the same people who said, oh yeah, I love this book, I'm going to follow this, they started saying, like, this fucked up my life. Like, or, I listened to you and I was just, like, I ended up really, looking back, you fucked me over, And then in the beginning, he's like, oh, those are just people, some certain people that just are haters or whatever. But then this one case happened where, like, yeah, he realized that his church that he was in, the priests or the pastors or whoever were molesting minors, and then it's kind of like, oh, shit, maybe I did done fucked up. Maybe I did kind of like lead people astray. Um, and that's the whole pulling the card. Yeah, taking the card out and the beliefs fall like a stack of cards kind of thing. So I thought that was really interesting. So this pretty much closes up our podcast for today. You know, this has been a very extensive podcast, but at the same time, I feel like I can do some editing magic. I can make sure that the highlights that you said like really shine. Probably cut out things that may not be necessary, but still useful anyway, because those things that you thought got you to your really good thoughts. So it's like, yeah, every thought matters because it brought you to your final conclusion. And there's a lot of good things that you actually put out there. So I just want to say, Okakura, thanks again for for doing this. Like, I'm excited for next time, and I hope that you also got a lot out of not just the book or the discussion, but just being able to voice your opinions and being put on the proverbial hot seat, as you call it. So yeah, those are my final thoughts. Any last thoughts or closing statements from you before we close this up?
Not really, other than the fact that like work was definitely weird. Freaking people started talking to me all of a sudden. It's just like, what? People never talk to me.
Huh? Really? Wow. You didn't tell anybody about your bank account information or anything, did you?
No, why would I'm
Okay.
not there to flex. I'm just there to work.
It's interesting. Like, honestly, I feel like my bank account changed when my beliefs about money changed. Again, a lot of that was influenced by you, and I was asking you questions about, like, okay, so why do you do this? Why do you do that? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And the more I talk to you, and the more I realize I understand like your logic and like the reasons why you were able to do what you accomplished. It just, like, to me, I feel like that changed my mind. This is all about like changing your mind and arguments or whatnot. And what I think is funny is that before, the way that I used to live is very different than how I am now. But you didn't have to argue with me in order for me to change. There was no argument at all. You just showed me how it was fucking done.
Yeah, I don't need to argue that my way is better just because, like, I proved to you, like, hey, I have more money than you. Like, you make more money than me by far, but I still have more money than you anyways, and I work minimum wage. Like, it was a wake-up call for you, I know.
Oh, yeah. Because it's like, wait, I'm making way more money, so doesn't that... And then this makes it worse for my entrepreneurial friend, because he was making like 5 times more money than me, or like over 5 or 6 times money. He was even more broke than I was. And I was like, there's something really wrong about this idea of like the more money you make per hour, the richer you are. Like, it's ridiculous. And what you can end up saving in 1 year is ridiculous. That's all.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And it's like, wait, that's it? You just gotta do this? And the funny thing is, you mentioned this, and I've quoted this to people. It's fucking easy. It's not even hard. That's the thing that I think so many people think, that it's hard to save money or it's hard to lose weight because you have to sacrifice so much. But then you kind of, like, when you see somebody like you and you're not even breaking a fucking sweat, you're just like, yep, I'm there. Okay. Kind of like with Japanese and the kanji, and I would meet with you the next day and you're like, yep, I went over 100. Yep, I did it again. Yep, I did it again. Up until you, like, you finished everything. It's like, oh, wow. You know, maybe it's because people think it's difficult that they make it difficult, but maybe it's not difficult, and you just need to see somebody who's just like doing it. You're almost like One Punch Man, dude. Like you're just like, yeah, what? Yeah, I killed him. One punch. Yeah, he wasn't that hard. That's kind
Yeah,
of like how I
yeah.
see it.
It's just it's definitely a matter of mindset. I mean, I've had to learn about this over a long period of time. It's just like it's not that hard. Like
Oh,
your biggest enemy is honestly yourself. Like you kind of make these mental walls in your head because I don't know. Maybe you're scared. Maybe you kind of sell yourself short. I mean, I definitely sell myself. I definitely sell myself short a lot,
hmm.
and it definitely took me a while to kind of come to a conclusion. Like, okay, so even if I'm ABC, I can still do XYZ
Ah,
because you know it. I guess it just really you just have to start doing it. Like it doesn't like you don't have to make it into a big deal.
huh.
Like you don't have to, you know. I guess that's like when I started realizing like I don't have to make this into a big ordeal, or I don't have to, I have to wait for the right time, or I have to,
Right.
like just waiting for the perfect moment to do things. Like you just do it. Like I mean, I learned that through mixing. Like you just do it. Like it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if it's not perfect. It doesn't matter if you kind of screw up in certain places, or you're bound to make a mistake at some point. And I did make mistakes, but I mean I still put something out there. Like there are definitely sometimes where I'm just like I don't really want to do this, but I kind of have to. Like I just want to prove to myself that if I actually put my all into something, I can do it. And every time I've wanted to prove myself that I can do it, I've done it.
Huh.
Like it doesn't matter if it's mixing, finances, and I'm gonna prove it again with my current secret hobby right now, which it's definitely gonna take me a while, but it's a new learning experience, and it's definitely gotten me super excited because I haven't really felt this excited in a while.
Wow. Yeah, it's interesting because like as we have like gosh, we've known each other for so long, and we like the longer you have history with somebody, you get to see their evolution. To me, I feel like it's really interesting to see like I don't know, just like the change that occurred. I want to say the last 4 or 5 years, like with what you've been doing, and it just spiked all of a sudden. It just like spiked like really crazy, and yeah, dude, I feel like whatever you're doing, you know, I'm excitedly kind of like waiting to see like okay, like what does he have now up his sleeve, because you've conquered things that so many people just never conquer, like money. There's so many people that just never conquer it, and you make it look so damn easy that it's impossible for me to be broke now because I'm like, gosh, it's this easy. Like, I I'd have to be willingly, purposely wanting to go broke in order to go broke at this point. Um, like that's like your influence that you've had on me just because of leading by example, literally, and like um, you'll even like trash talk a bit, which I find like wow, like this like yeah, you suck at saving, or like wow, that's all and it's like wow, like this guy. It's so interesting. So like I can only imagine whatever it is you're doing now, like how that's going to kind of turn out. So super excited for you. You know.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna take me a couple of weeks to try and master it because
Hmm. Oh,
it's
weeks,
definitely kind of
weeks, not months. Weeks. Okay.
weeks. Yes, weeks. Like,
Okay.
well, it could take me months, but I would like to condense it down to weeks because
Huh.
I guess it's definitely something that can make me money, and it's definitely
Wow.
something I would enjoy doing. Like
Whoa.
compared to what I'm currently doing at Olive Garden, it would definitely pay a lot more depending on
Oh wow, dude.
it. It,
Wow.
it would massively depend on like if I can actually get the right stuff,
Uh huh.
you know, if I can find the right people, if I can do the right things, if I can utilize the right tools.
Whoa.
But I can definitely see the potential if I do everything the way I think it, if the way I think I can do it.
Uh huh.
But we'll have to see. Like I can't really predict the future, but as long as I, do the same thing as I did with Japanese finances, fan dubbing, like I'll definitely get around to it. But I guess the only problem is that I don't really have a mentor. I guess this time, like I'm actually on my own.
Wow.
Um, like at least with Japanese and fan dubbing, I had you to teach me, and with finances, I have a bunch of YouTube reviews. But with this current thing that I'm doing, while I do have YouTube, it's kind of not helping me the way I thought it would.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it definitely feels kind of weird, like actually having to kind of relearn everything. But obviously, I'll just take it at my own pace since there's also work to balance, and then also some other stuff.
Sweet. Yeah. No, like I think that's super exciting. So, you know what? I think we'll wrap it up here actually. I think that's a good note. Leave it at a high note kind of. And I'm looking forward to next time, maybe next week or whenever works best for you. But I found this conversation really enlightening. There were some things that you posed that even questioned the fabric of scout mindset itself. Something I didn't even really consider until you mentioned it.
Obviously, man, I always question everything. That's why curiosity is like one of the strongest feelings like ever.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's true. It's like, what do they say? The cure for boredom is curiosity. The cure for curiosity, there is no cure for curiosity. So yeah, that's true. Well, I think your curiosity got you to where you are, and I think we're both in places that we feel very happy about in our lives. And I think
I can definitely feel happier. Like I feel content right now, but I can definitely feel happier.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. To be fair, maybe I'm pretty sure I can feel happier too with a few things. So, yeah, I do agree that there's more to be had, but we're I guess we can agree though that we're in a good place. For our standards and what we want in life, we're doing pretty good. So,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, dude. Well, it was awesome talking to you again. Even more awesome that we're able to capture this via podcast. And like I said, like I'll go through this, peruse it, and I'll gosh, yeah, I'll show you the finished product once I'm done. It might take a while, but you know, I hope that in the end, yeah, when it all comes together, we'll find it really satisfying. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, as always, dude, I'm gonna say 2021 is the best year ever, and it's the year of unlocking potential. And I think that doing this podcast thing, excellent idea. Thanks for mentioning just that you wanted to do that. So until next time, dude, keep up the mindset, keep the fire alive, and have fun with that hobby of yours, that new project.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely having a lot of fun.
All right. Peace out, Okakura.
Peace.